let's just take a moment to check in and go around the circle and see if people have anything they want to add to what got said this morning, even just in a breath, in a sentence. Was there anything that you wanted to add? What you heard or what? Yeah.
So, yeah, I just did want to say, because it's been very much on my mind, and I didn't mention it and others did, is this issue of that Jody brought up, and thank you, of this issue of our privilege, of our extraordinary privilege, and the growing crisis of inequality. Piketty and others who've documented, there's a new study out that shows that the U.S., I think it's from Brookings, that the U.S. among most developed countries is the worst in terms of the condition of across every kind of social fabric measure of any self-respecting nation, and just more and more data about this crisis of inequality that is horrific. And it may be another leverage point, but it's also something that we just have to keep in mind all the time. So I thank you for those who brought it up. And I didn't. I'll put it back.
Yeah.
In regard to the process, what it's stunning to me is how we began with such quiet and how that has generated such activity and excitement in my mind. Mm-hmm. So there's a paradox there that I am only beginning to understand. You probably already had figured out, but I am only beginning to understand that.
Mm-hmm. And just pass it, Kathy. That's going to be good. In case you can pass if you're not.
Not that I need to add anything right now.
I'll say something I said to Bonnie, and I think that, that the tribute to the council is what I feel with each one is this maturing. And it's not that we all think alike. It's not a coalescence, I think is the word we used, but it is a maturing of how we process information from each other and integrate it into ourselves. But still, it's just very mature. I'm not exactly sure how to even embody that. And then the other phrase that always comes to my mind with this group, and particularly this morning, the other phrase that comes to my mind, particularly after this morning, is this whole sense of being tortured by the gray. And I think, again, as part of our privilege, we all think in the gray zone. We don't see things as black and white, which is sometimes the easy way to do things. But when you see the gray, you are tortured by it because it's a fog. We don't know exactly where we're going, and we know that we want to get out of where we're at, and that there is a need for clearing the fog, but being there we have to be there to actually move away from this polarization that the rest of the world seems to be on this, and the solutions are in the gray. It connects back to with your systems. It's so complicated. When you pull back from a network of systems, a systems network, it looks gray. But there's actually clarity when you get closer and think about it that way.
I just wanted to, the theme of gratitude that came up from Kathleen used the word gratitude, and that resonated deeply with me. Just wanted to add that again, gratitude, just how important that is. And that resonates with my experience this year, especially somehow, this last couple of months, how important it is. Thank you.
I think there was a time when we met together and we felt like, are we the only ones? And then there was the walk, and then there was the conference, and I think you know, I don't know about any of you, but it was so heartening to see the rising of so many people, of so many voices, and so many people who just stood and said, I don't necessarily know what to do, but I want you to know I'm concerned. And I think that was very inspiring. And one of the other things I've totally forgot is that I think all along from the beginning, I listened to everyone, and I keep saying, well, what's missing? Like where do we need to add? And I spoke about this last night, where I said we need a vision of how good it can be when we're living more equitably, not only with each other but with the planet. And I think that always those shifts occur with storytelling, from children's stories to the larger narrative. And you know, in many instances, I think the patriarchal story needs to be altered. It's no longer relevant, and it. I was approached by a film production company, and they asked me to make a film. And you know, I feel like I've been waiting for signal, like an antenna, like which way should I go, or how shall I serve, and in the meantime, I've been doing all these things that in the end are going to help me answer that signal. So I wanted to just say, I'm making a movie.
Another movie. Second. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I just wanted to mention, where is systems theory? Mainly in business programs at the moment, in institutions. And it is not, I mean, there are very few places where you can get a degree in systems. And of course, computers as a tool has exploded and made millions and millions and millions for people. And the really critical underlying ideas that make the computer possible have gotten lost in the shuffle. Interesting to notice.
There's an idea I've been experimenting with in my personal life that I think is relevant to our topics here too, which is the hypothesis that, and Joni, you touched on this a little bit, what if everybody is actually doing the best they can? Mm-hmm. And what I've been reading that led me to that, sort of experimenting with that practice, is some research from psychology that the most compassionate people are the people with the best boundaries, personal boundaries. Because it takes those two things. If you have lousy boundaries, then you're trying to get everybody else to behave differently so they're not impinging upon you, right? If you have strong boundaries, like it's okay with me that you're doing the best that you can, but no, I'm not going to give you more money for your alcohol habit, or whatever, all the things we struggle with in some of our personal relationships. So I look at my whole career in climate as basically trying to change everybody, to get everybody to, understand and see new habits, and you could try this, and what if you tried that? And another approach is, well, they're doing the best they can, but actually it's not okay with me. There's sacred things for the future, and a boundary needs to be set to protect those. And I noticed on the flight here, this guy sitting next to me in the seat had his elbow constantly in my ribs, and I never said anything for 5 hours, right? That socialization, that I don't want to make this other person uncomfortable, embarrassed, whatever. I don't have the right to my own little space. So yeah, he was doing the best he can, but instead I was being resentful. So what would that look like, applied to the whole climate? I think is a really interesting question.
This is just a group. And I can't remember when it first started happening. Oh, it was in Edinburgh. In the council, I was there. I'm interested in the question of, can we just be with what is without judgment? And I don't mean I love what you just said, but it spurred this idea in my mind of, what is it like if we know that this isn't bad or good, it just is? This wonderful Sherpa friend taught me that in Nepal in the 80s. Not good, not bad, just is. How does that change our behavior if we can actually be in the present? Things that Willow was saying. Without, not that we don't have boundaries, but that we, by letting it all in all the time and just being in this moment, won't that have the most accurate and life-affirming possibilities in what we do? It's a shift in our relationship to time and to strategy and to necessity. It's something about a combination of acceptance and accuracy. I don't know.
Resignation.
No, it's not resignation.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I actually think, I'm sure. I don't think it's resignation. I think it's changing what we are in relationship. It's back to this question of what's the paradigm shift. Isn't it, if we are in the moment fully, isn't it much, and knowing what we know, isn't it most likely that what comes from that moment to moment will be life-affirming and death acknowledging, because it's all one. It isn't separate. Okay, who was first? I think it was Camille.
I'll be brief. After we were briefed by Dan Schrag, I mean, I was like, why don't we all know about this? Why isn't this broadcast like daily? And then strangely, so many of my friends were having babies, and I was like, are you kidding me? You know, like, well, how can you have a baby? Don't you know what's coming? You know, and I had to slow my roll. Like, I stepped back and I sat with what is, and it was not resignation. It was just fully being aware that life finds a way. And that them having those children was one of the most normal, natural things that could occur. And I was like, okay, you know, that it's not going to stop. It may be incredibly altered, but being aware, like something Beth said in one of our councils really always stuck with me, which was, why do I feel like I'm the one that has to fix this? Or why do I feel like I have to fix this? And I think in that sitting I was like, you know, we are all doing the best we can, and unfortunately that doesn't always seem to be good enough. But it is what it is, and so sitting with that, then what? Then you can say then what? And I think so much more is possible and life-affirming, and you know, those people become soldiers because they don't want their children to inherit a planet that is destroyed. So I just wanted to share that.
I guess after passing it first, I increasingly felt like I wanted to put another chair there, an empty chair, and that empty chair being for the word "and." I just feel like, we have a tendency, and not just in this circle, I mean, we in the larger collective, of wanting to jump to the better vision, which I so would love to be true, and that gratitude and awe and wonder, and I so would love to live in this place. And there is all the things that are not life-affirming, all the things that are not just good, all the things that are not just the best that we can do. I think some people just don't do the best they can. I feel that every day in my work and see it everywhere, and it drives me crazy that we can spend our days with idiotic, sloppy work that then gets thrown out there and is a waste of time, a waste of resources, and it's just, we will miss doors. We will miss the train on certain things. Species will be lost. People will die. I mean, it's just, they're already doing that. And I don't know, I feel again and again that in a culture, in particular, the American culture, that is so opposed to having a hard feeling, like a bad, uncomfortable feeling, openly, publicly displayed, be that passion, like true passion, be that grief, be that anger, that there is some need to put a chair there for the end of that too. And I don't know, maybe, it's my shtick, I need to keep bringing that up, but it just feels like it's missing way too far often from the conversation, that it is also horror. It is abhorrent what we do, and to each other, to other species, to the world. And, in your book, the clarity of why is it wrong to wreck it? I think we need to actually face that and really sit with the discomfort of, yep, I have done that. So.
And
I knew that. I set that up.
you did. Thank you very much. The question rings in my mind. If we said, not good, not bad, just is, how would that change us and how would it change the conversation? Well, one answer, it seems to me, is that if we say, it's not good, it's not bad, it just is, we would become well-behaved scientists who says, my only responsibility is to describe. It's not my work to make a moral judgment. I say what is, and then somebody else in this world says what ought to be, or what is hideous, or what is unacceptable. So the notion of it just is seems to me to require a response and say, nothing just is. Everything is there is better, there is worse. And it's hugely important to say so. And perhaps I'm misunderstanding, and I don't come from the traditions that might help me understand that. But if there's one mean thing that I would say to a scientist, it would be, it's not enough to describe. You have to express your honest feelings about what that means to you as a moral being. You can't escape being a moral being. And, when I travel, I am always asked, what do I do? And I say, I am a full-time climate warrior. Invariably, they say, good for you. Thank you for that work. It's really important. And so far, I haven't had the courage to say back, yeah, well, what about you? How come I'm the one who has to say this? What is it that's keeping you from saying it? And I think part of it is this reluctance to be what has come to be known as judgmental. But isn't judgmental who we are? Isn't that what it means to be a moral being, is to acknowledge that there's better and worse and be willing to give reasons for your judgments?
Yeah, well, I'm not capable of answering this.
I'm just going to say that. I'm sitting here with my teacher, who I really want to turn this over to. So I'm going to just grope a little bit more, and then I'm going to see if Will is interested in talking about it. I think I'm talking about something else that doesn't actually mean not having a moral compass. It may mean not being judgmental, though. I think I'm trying to talk about a space in which we are with all of the pain, we are with all of the love, we are with this extraordinary thing that Mary Evelyn points to as this creative unfolding that isn't something that came to be out of a human set of perceptions. It's this magnificence and effervescence. Oh, I can't get my mouth around it, but I love that word. Anyway, it is this creative unfolding. And there's some way within that we never step back enough to really see ourselves or to know what we are within that. It's as if it is all happening. We were, as I've said to Diana, there's this great misunderstanding that we had about kind of the limits of what it meant to be human within a living system. It's just like, duh. It's like our frontal cortex, some psychologists taught me this, it's like our brain wasn't quite good enough, and our embodiment, there's at least a lot of white males, failed to be embodied in a way that kept them more connected, and they had a lot of power, and they made choices in terms of energy, and there's like misunderstandings. Probably that involves judgment, if to even say that. But there's some large neutral space, and I know it's not, I completely relate to the way you understand what's ethical. I feel like that's a natural way of our human being. You know, there's some way that isn't a matter of judging. It's more like if we actually be in the present, we will be of that sense of ethical being. Willa, can you say anything else?
I can try. I think that there is a possibility of being a deeply moral person and not being judgmental. That's really an interesting koan, isn't it? I guess, at least for me, the word judgmental brings with it a notion of condemnation, and condemnation of actions, but also condemnation of the people who engage in those actions. And I love what Joni said about the gray, that if you start seeing through the glasses of the gray, you can no longer be fully judgmental because you realize that there's deep goodness in everyone. And even in the people that engage in the most morally objectionable actions, there is goodness there somewhere. And to acknowledge that is complicated, and to acknowledge that can even be much more challenging, actually, than writing them off. So, but in the sort of the bigger picture, so this is what I heard actually what I heard in Sarah's words about non-judgmental is this vision, so the vision that doesn't discount being a moral being in the world, but a possibility that no one is fully evil, and no one is also fully, well, maybe there are beings that are fully good. I hope so, I pray so. But beings are complicated, and perhaps the space of is it possible, we can hold the koan, or I hold the koan, to come from a place of compassion, fierce compassion that recognizes the complexity of individuals, and acknowledges and even reveres their deeper goodness. And in fact, the compassion can be fueled by the fact that you know there's that goodness down there, and how could they be engaging in these actions given that deep goodness? That can fuel compassion and fuel an interest in action. So I don't see that. I mean, my perception just now, what you two said, didn't sound contradictory, but it's just different ways of expressing what morality is. I don't know. That's my just reflection on this.
I think we could probably go longer. I'm going to suggest that this may come up later and that we turn to a couple of things that we need to do before we have our lunch, if that's okay. Is there anything that really, I mean, I could talk for a while more about this. Maybe we could do that. But are we okay to shift?
Can I say 2 words?
2 words, yes.
Because I found myself last night juxtaposing how I feel about my own death and how I would feel about the death of this planet. And it is so totally clear that individual death is an essential part of how the planet works. But that the ending of the planet is the ending of something that may not ever again happen, and may not happen elsewhere, although they say the odds are good that it does. And that seems so incredibly wasteful. And so it is clear that even though we are obsessed with saving, extending life and fighting against death as if it were a bad thing, death is a necessary thing. Extinction is not. Well, extinction ultimately is, but the death of the whole planet is not. I think it's a different order of thing. And I think one of the problems we have in discussing climate change is realizing that we have juxtaposed 2 pictures. One involves a lot of loss, a lot of suffering. Much of it is already determined. It's going to happen. Species are being lost every day. The other is that the planet would go so far out of balance that it would no longer be viable. And the reality is we're going to have to deal with the suffering. We're not going to be able to prevent it. We're not going to be able to prevent the losses. But that there's something so valuable in the viability and further development and beauty that, no, I can't accept that. I can accept my death, heck. That's easy.
I'll be really quick. So yes, thank you for that. And the other thing is, on the way to losing sentient life on the planet, we're at risk of losing our humanity. Mm-hmm. And some of what we're talking about now, about judgment and about how we hold ourselves and what we learn from a variety of faith traditions and disciplines about who to be in the face of an unimaginable and unprecedented crisis, is a really important piece of work, whether or not, in the end, we lose all living beings on this planet.
Okay.
I'm sorry. One more.
Yes. Partly just because I think there was a seed in what I said that launched this too. I wanted to just clarify, part of what I'm talking about is a stance for myself, right? For my health and ability to persevere. I'm experimenting with and finding value in the stance that everyone else is doing the best that they can. Mm-hmm. And I'm learning that it's when I feel powerless and don't stand up in my full power that then I'm trying to get everybody else to be different, because there's a stance where I say everyone else is doing the best they can, And I'm not going to let them hurt things that are essential, you know. So it actually calls me to hire harder for me things to do. And it makes sense if I think about it when my kids were little, right? It wasn't like, oh, they're not being very good. They're, you know, running with scissors, and I wish that they would not do that. Or, you know, if I explain to them why that's so bad, it's just like, no, I'm not going to let you do that, right? And they don't have, it's that kind of a sense. They're doing the best they can, but it's dangerous, and I'm not going to let it happen. That's what I was trying to articulate.
Okay.
I'm going to suggest that this last question for the session be like a one-sentence response. Share something that you'd like to see nourished in yourself and between us during our time together.
Right. When you hold it this way, you can almost see the atmosphere around it. Greater clarity about the way forward for me and for us.
Well, I would have said that if I had thought of it, because that's really right. But what I was going to say was it's a tie between compassion and courage in the face of what seems to be a pretty hopeless situation.
Always a lovely act to follow you.
Sorry.
All right, I'm going to go with the continued C. So we have clarity, compassion, courage. I'm going to add connectivity or connection between us and within myself to myself. It's got to be C.
I was on it before you said that. What I'd really like to see nourished is something that's so unique to the humankind, human nature, humanities, is creativity.
I'm going to go with trust of self and between us.
I'm going to say audacity.
I'm going to say, I don't want to say ambition. I want to say the belief that we can make a difference. Sounds like ambition, but it's not the same thing.
I'm calling forth the ability to hold the tension between extremes, so within myself and us as a group, that it's simultaneously possible to be a time of deep loss and a time of deep hope, a time of disaster and injustice and a time of possibility, and to not make each other wrong when we happen to be in one of those places, and to not make myself wrong, to sort of hold the tension.
This is also opposites. To come from deep silence together, from source, from emptiness, which may allow us to be creative, more creative, and also to laugh a lot. Didn't get a laugh, but it's okay. You laughed a little.
It's a serious truth.
Okay, thank you. Lunch.